All right, welcome, welcome. So yesterday, you guys learned about slope and slope-intercept form. And if you're still finishing up some of those lessons, you should have some time today. We still have like 5 new lessons today, but a couple of them go super, super quick. So if there's still something from yesterday, then no worries. I knew that was kind of ambitious, even if I had been here, but it also didn't feel like enough if I only did part of it. So trying to make sure that you guys are going to be well prepared for Algebra 2. And yeah, so if we saw, let's pretend this just says y over here, y equals 3x plus 2. That is in what we did yesterday, or you did yesterday without me, slope-intercept form. Okay, so again, this is not in your notes. This would have been something I would have given you in class, but for whatever reason, they didn't really, the particular lesson wasn't in the Odyssey-ware. This second equation is in standard form. So in slope-intercept form, the y is always by itself. In standard form, the x and the y are always on the same side, and they're equal to some constant. They could be added or subtracted because one of them could be negative, right? So when x and y are on the same side, equal to the constant, that's called standard form. And standard form is a bit on the picky side. So not only do x and y have to be on the same side, x and y, x, y, and the constant, the coefficients are all going to be integers. So no fractions, no decimals, they're not allowed if it's standard form. And the number in front of the x, the coefficient of x, has to be positive, and the x has to go before the y. So now we know why he's your x, because he is picky, picky, picky. He has to be happy, he has to go first. He doesn't allow any fractions or decimals, all right? So we're looking at things like the one I just had up, or you could have something like 4x minus 3y is equal to 12. So the y could be negative, that coefficient can be negative, but the x can't be negative. So if I had this, if I had something like this, that would not quite be in standard form because the x is not positive. To make it in standard form, kind of like if you were solving an equation, if the x has to be positive, I would have to take this whole thing times -1, and everybody's signs would switch so that the x would be positive. So those two equations are the same line, but the one with a negative with the 4 would not be considered in standard form. So yesterday, you guys learned to graph with slope-intercept form, where you start it on the intercept, the y-intercept, and then you use the slope. But if you're going to graph from standard form, the first thing we're going to do is find both the x and y intercepts. So if I have this equation, 3x plus 2y is equal to 18. And if I want to know the y-intercept, so if I want to know where does that cross the y-axis, think about when we were graphing, if things touched the y-axis, their x was 0. So if this x is 0, this whole part just becomes 0, right? Because 3 times 0 is just going to be 0. So then if I want to know the y-intercept, this is the equation that I'm working at on the right. So then I'm just working with 2y is equal to 18. Divide by 2. The y-intercept is 9. And if I want to know the x-intercept, same kind of thing. If I want to know the x-intercept, then that means the y is equal to 0. Because remember, any place on the x-axis doesn't go up and down. So then the y would be equal to 0. So if I did 3x plus 2y is 18 and the y is 0, well, 2 times 0, this is all just going to be 0, which basically means it's gone. In person, I just like usually cover that up, like it's gone. So then I just focus on the rest that says 3x equals 18 and divide by 3. So the x-intercept is 6. So then x-intercept is 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Y-intercept was 9. And then we're going to connect. So if you want the x-intercept, you're going to take the constant, divide it by the x coefficient. If you want the y-intercept, you're taking the constant, divide it by the y coefficient. So let's see what that's going to look like. First, before we worry about graphing, we will just make sure that I'm in the right spot here. Yep. Learning. So you guys should see that you did have some new IXL lessons pop up. And let's see, here we go. We're going to be camping out in those S's for a while now. There will be some of these sections we don't do at all, but the S's is a section we hit pretty hard. All right. So right here, standard form, find x and y intercepts. So this is S18. And remember, it's like ignore the, if it says x-intercept, it's like we are just ignoring the y number. So we are basically ignoring this. And we're just, and then what's left? It just says x is equal to -3. So my x-intercept is -3. That time, I don't even need to divide, because if I ignore the y part, all I have is x is equal to -3. So if the y were 0, the x would be at -3. So this time it says y-intercept. So since it says y-intercept, I'm ignoring the x, and I'm just looking at, so I look at this, it says 7y is -7. So I'm just doing -7 divided by 7. So -1. So you probably can do that without writing things down. I'm just trying to make sure that we're looking at, you see why I'm doing what I'm doing. So when it asks for y, you're going to be dividing by the one that's with the y. When it asks for the x-intercept, divide by the one that's with the x. Scroll that down a bit. So it says y, so I'm ignoring this guy. That's what I'm focused on. Just 5y is equal to 5. So 5 divided by 5. What do you guys think? B1, yep. Now, you might say like, wow, that is going to go quick. And it does. It goes pretty quick. 4 divided by 4, another 1. But we're going to get into some eventually. I'm going to go ahead and jump a level. Sometimes it gets a little tricky. So y-intercept. So if I have 7y equals 0, what is 0 divided by 7? 0. Good. So it's just like you're solving a little one-step equation. That didn't fool you at all. Now's when it gets tricky. So now it says x-intercept, so I'm ignoring my y. So 5x is equal to -1. The answer is not -5. Because think about if you were solving it, which one's going to be on the bottom? The 5. So this is what you want to answer, -1/5. So -1/5. So if it doesn't divide evenly, remember that it's the constant. If we think about this being ax plus by equals c, if I want the x-intercept, it's c divided by a. If I want the y-intercept, it's c divided by b. So the coefficient of the variable is on the bottom. The constant is on the top. With division, we can't just switch the order. So you can't just look at it and go, oh, 5 divided by 1, that's going to be -5. No, because the 5 and the 1 are in the wrong place for that. So it can be a fraction. You will not be asked to graph places where it's a fraction for the intercept, but not all lines cross at nice, perfect spots on the x and y axis. So we can still find these things even though they would be messy to graph. So 6y is equal to 0. So then 0 divided by 6, another 0, good. And then this one, I have 2 divided by 4. Now, you should always, notice this says simplify your answer. So 2/4 is going to get marked wrong because as a fraction, that can reduce to 1/2. Now, I think it would also accept if I put 0.5. I'm going to try it. So if I put 0.5 as a decimal, it did accept that. So if it doesn't divide, like if it's not a whole number, if the decimal comes out evenly, you could use a decimal. But if the decimal is like filling up your calculator screen, you can't just round it off. You need to just leave it in a fraction. So like this one, it would not work to use a decimal because it's a repeating decimal. So y-intercept here, so I have -15y is -10. So -15 is going to go on the bottom. And then we have y. 2 negatives we know make a positive. And then what do you guys think? Could 10 over 15 reduce? Do they have something in common? They have 5s in common. So we need to reduce that by dividing by 5. And then you get 2/3. If you type it in the calculator, you're going to get 0.666, a whole bunch of 6s and a 7. And even if you type all of them in there, it's still going to mark that wrong, okay? Because that's still really rounded at the end. So if the decimal does not end, you need to be sure that you reduce the fraction. If you have a calculator, one of the TI-30 models, If you have a calculator that you can enter a fraction, like this one has something that says ABC on it, and you can enter fractions that way. If I put 10 ABC 15 and I hit equal, it reduces it for me to 2/3. So for you ladies in class, your calculators in class will, the ones in your bags will do it, they will reduce the fraction for you. All right, so that's what you're doing in S18. Gonna, like I said, toward the end, get a little trickier because you might have to have some fractions or reduce the fractions. And then in S19, you're gonna graph the equation using both intercepts. So it's like doing two of the problems you just did in the same problem. So you can start with whichever one you want. Let's say I start with the x. If I start with x, then I'm first thinking to myself, 7x is -28. And I'm ignoring the y. So I'm going to divide by 7 and get x is -4. Now that says x is equal to -4. So I'm going to go to my x-axis, that's the horizontal axis, and click on -4. Then my other equation says -4y is equal to -28. So now I'm using the y coefficient, divide by -4, and y is equal to +7. So then I click on +7 on the y. So when you're dividing by the one with the x, that goes on the x-axis. When you're dividing by the coefficient of the y, that goes on the y-axis. And you might very much be able to do that once, like do one step, click it, do the other one without even writing something down. But I'm just trying to show you what's going on in my head. It's a scary place up there, but I'll let you in for just a minute. So this time, if I do the -35 divided by 7, I get -5, and that's an x. I divide it by the x. And then if I do -35 divided by -5, I get +7, and that's the y. Now, these last two, you may have noticed, they were just kind of the switch of the coefficients. That's not always going to be the case, okay? So this one is actually easier, but it always trips people up sometimes. So x plus y is 6. So if I ignore the y, that just says x equals 6. I can do 6 divided by 1, it's still 6. And if I ignore the x, the equation says y equals 6. And those are my 2 points. You won't get anything that's fractions on this, on making these graphs. So here, if I want the x-intercept, I'm going to do 4x is equal to -4. If I want the y-intercept, which I want both, I'm going to have y is equal to -4 because it doesn't have a number. The first one for the x, we're going to divide by 4. So I have x is equal to -1. So -1 goes on the x line. And then y is -4. So I'm going to have to get down here. Y is -4. Now, I want to show you something with this equation. So this equation starts out this way. Now, from what you guys know about literal equations and how we can move equations around, this equation would be the same thing. If I wanted it to be in slope-intercept form, I could just move the 4x over, and my equation would look like this, negative 4x minus 4. So if that was my equation, now let's see if we graph it, if we get the same thing. We would have started at negative 4. There's negative 4, and we would have went down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1. And it would be the same line. So some people like to put everything in slope-intercept form and then graph. But to me, that seems like a little extra work because that was pretty fast just to find those 2 points. But either way, that kind of confirms that my graph is right. Because if I had put it in slope-intercept form, it would be the same thing. You're going to see that they start giving you some bigger numbers. It's still the same process. So for the x, we have 20x is equal to negative 600. And to find the y, I'm going to be doing 12y is negative 600. So negative 600 divided by 20 is negative 30. And that says x equal, so I'm going to put it on the x line. And for the y, negative 600 divided by 12, I get negative 50. And so I got to scroll down here, negative 50. And then once I have both of them, it's automatically connecting them with the line for me, of course. Well, let's see. Try jumping up. And if I jump another level, it takes me to 90. So, but if you look at that question, it's really still not any harder because it's still just divide by the x, divide by the y. So take some time now to work on S18 and 19. Should be doing, like, in 18, 1 quick division problem. In 19, 2 quick division problems where you plot the 2 points. And then after that, we'll look at horizontal and vertical lines. All right, so next part of our lesson will be on horizontal and vertical lines. And these 2 lessons, if you write down just a tiny bit of information, these 2 lessons should go really quickly. I should not see that you answered 100 questions to get this lesson. Please don't just guess, all right? So if it's a horizontal line, so think about this. If I were trying to write this line in slope-intercept form, I would say that y is equal, oh, come here, little pencil. Y is equal, now the slope, it's 0 because it doesn't go up and down. Well, since the slope's 0, there's not going to be any x. And then where does it cross the y line? It crosses the y-axis at 7. In fact, it crosses all these points. We've got negative 9, 7, negative 8, 7, negative 6, 7, negative 4, 7, 0, 7, 4, 7. 7's always the answer. So if you have a horizontal line, any horizontal line, horizontal like the horizon, straight across. So if it's horizontal, it's always going to be y equal some number. And it's just wherever it's going through the y-axis, because that's what y is always equal to. If instead it was a vertical line, so if horizontal goes this way, vertical, just erase this part. Vertical is going to go the other way, right? Vertical is going to be straight up and down. Like, I don't know, skateboarders might say something about getting vertical, or a basketball player has a vertical jump. So they're talking about how high off the ground they get. And so that's up and down. So this is going to be my x equals blank. It's the opposite way of what it goes, right? So y tells me about going up and down, but a y only line goes across. X tells me go side to side, but an x only line goes up and down. So this answer is going to be y equals 7. And that's what I type, y equals 7. Oh, darn. That's not what I was trying to do. Hello? So anytime it's only a y, so only y, horizontal. Only x, vertical. So this one is horizontal because it's only a y. This time I see the graph somewhere, and it is a horizontal line, so it has only a y. So I say y is equal, and then it's going through -7. Again, is this horizontal or vertical? It only has a y, so it's horizontal. Only a y, horizontal. By the way, if you hit enter, that works instead of finding the submit button. This one is vertical, straight up and down. So this time I want x is equal to, and it's going through +7. Sevens have been wild on mine today. This does not get harder. It's just more of the same. Okay, I'll even jump to make sure. When I jump, I see I just have another vertical line. Write the equation. X is equal to -8. So more of the same. And then in S21, you are making the graph. Now, you have to have 2 points to make a line. It does not matter where your 2 points are. So it says graph a horizontal or vertical line. This says y equals 9. So personally, I'm going to go to 9 on the y, and then I can go anywhere I want straight across. If you want to go one spot, great. If you want to go all the way out here, great. As long as it makes a horizontal line. By the way, you don't even have to be on that to start with. You could put them both way out to the side, as long as it makes a horizontal line where y is 9. So y is 3. So I'm going to go down. I just think it's kind of obvious the y-axis. So I usually do put 1 here, but the other one could be wherever you want. Just don't, if it starts doing this, you jacked it up. You know, you got to go straight across. Everyone in this lesson should either be straight across if it's a y, or straight up and down if it's an x. So here's our x. So x is equal to 5. So here's 5, and then any place straight up and down so that it's going through every point on that line, the x would be 5. And that's it as far as S20 and 21. It does not get harder. They may give you numbers that say hundreds, but it's still the same process. All right, so last part of today's lesson, it will all end up being in one video instead of 2. And so this last part, this is 12. And while the lesson says solving for y, you're going to see these directions all say, rewrite the equation in slope-intercept form. So that does mean get y by itself, right? So slope-intercept form we know is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept, and the y is by itself. All right, so if you start out with something like this, the only thing that's with the y is the plus 5, but I got some other stuff going on the right. There's no parentheses in slope-intercept form. So we need to get rid of those parentheses. So if I had y plus 5 is equal to 7, I'm just going to rewrite my equation. So it's a little bigger and you can see it. And so we have some space here. So I'm going to distribute. I'm going to pretend that I could actually solve this. And then I want to get the y by itself. So I'm going to have to move this 5 over. So then I've got y is equal to 7x, 14 minus 5 is 9. And now I kind of ask myself, okay, now is it in the right form? Like the y is by itself equal to some number times the x's plus the 9. And that's what I need to type in. And when you type these, make sure you're paying attention. Like, don't forget about the x. The plus, you're going to have to use a shift, which you may have already come across that on other problems. But just make sure that, take a look at it, make sure it looks like what you've probably written down on paper before you just hit submit. And then realize, oh, that said 7x equal 9. Oh, no wonder I got it wrong. But this is what I had on my paper. So always take a look at it before you click submit. So the first ones are going to be probably the same way for you, where you need to distribute, because again, this is your goal, slope-intercept form, like yesterday's format. So I'm going to distribute first. So I'm taking that -6 times the x and times the 4. Then I've got to get the y by itself. So remember back in literal equations, when you solve for a certain variable, it just means you get that variable by itself. But then specifically, they want this in slope-intercept form. So that's why I need my -6x, my -32, not the -32 first. So y equals -6x minus 32. There's going to be some fractions in here, so that may be another challenge for you. So don't let that overwhelm. So if it's just like 1 over a number, that's the same, 1/5 is the same thing as divide by 5. And if it's multiplied times a variable, you're just going to write the fraction next to the variable. That's it. Now, the 10 times 1/5 is the same thing as saying 10 divided by 5. So 1/5 times 10, it's like 10 over 1. This is 10 over 5, which is 2. And so you can multiply times the top number, divide by the bottom number. That's how all fractions work when you're multiplying. But since the top number is only a 1, it basically, you could just in your head go 10 divided by 5 is 2. And then don't get so excited about that you type that in, because we still have to move the 8. So I'm going to subtract 8. Well, don't type that in anyway, because I'm sure you don't have the same problem as I do. And then 2 take away 8 is -6. So y is equal to 1/5, 1/5 x minus 6. So it looks ugly, I don't really like the way it looks with the way the fraction looks, but that is the way we are to type it in. So another one with a fraction. Again, it's just 1/3. So that means the same thing as if divide by 3 if I'm working with a number. So 1/3 times x, keep it simple, it's just 1/3 x. 1/3 times 3 means 3 divided by 3, which would be 1. Now get the y by itself by subtracting 7. So 1 take away 7, -6. Y is equal to 1/3x minus 6. Okay, so after this problem, I'm going to jump a level. These are actually equations that are in something called point slope form. And then we're going to be looking at some that are in, we're going to see some next probably where they're in slope in our standard form, and we're changing them. That's the same thing. No, maybe not. Oh, no. So here, the difference on this one that's going to make it a little bit harder is we have a fraction that has a top and a bottom, not just a number in the bottom with a 1 on the top. Also, we have to be careful of the signs. So -9/10 times x, just write that fraction in front of the x. Then -9/10 times -10. So that's like saying 9 times 10, but then divide by 10. So that becomes 9, and the two negatives make that positive. So this is like saying -9/10 times -10 over 1. So that's +90/10, which is just 9. Or I could think of these 10s crossing out and making that -9 times -1. It's still 9. Then get the y by itself. We've got still have to get rid of that 10, so I'm going to subtract 10. And y is equal to -9/10 x minus 1. So I have to still pay attention to those rules for signed numbers. X minus 1. Well, it doesn't think it's a different level, but I know it eventually gives us a different kind of problem. Distribute, so I just distributed this one, multiplied the 7. Seems like a little vacation after that, those ones with the fractions. Add 2 on both sides. Y equals 7x plus 9. Notice when we're adding 2, we're adding it to the constant. Hopefully you've noticed that. We're not adding it to the x's because it's not like terms with the x's. So y is equal to 7x plus 9. Aha, here we go. And then this is the other type that you're going to see. And actually, this is the type that in class I would expect you might have to come upon more frequently. So if we were trying to graph and we were trying to find the intercepts because it was in standard form, when we were doing the ones with graphing, they were all nice, pretty numbers, right? They were whole numbers. We could graph them easily. If I were trying to graph this one and I tried to find the intercepts, I would have things like 8/19 and 4. Well, 8/19 would be really ugly to try to graph because it's not a slope. It would be a point. I don't want to try to figure out where that is. So if I do put it into slope intercept form, then I can get away from that. Then I don't have to try to graph some messy intercept. So that's the reason why we would need to. So just think you would want to get the y by itself. So in this case, I would get rid of these x's. They're not supposed to be there because I'm trying to put it in this format. So if the x's can't stay on the left, I'm going to subtract them on both sides. Equals negative 19x plus 8. And then everything would get divided by 2 because I'm supposed to get the y by itself. And then I would have y is equal to negative 19 over 2x plus 4. And that still looks messy, but a slope that is a fraction is not a big deal. I would just be going down 19 and over 2. I'd need a really big graph, but yep, yours is like mine. So I see Brandy's getting a question that's very much like the one I have on my screen. So if, I'll just mark this one out and work through what she's got here. So here, if I had something like this, my goal is still this, to get the y over there by itself. So the y is not where he's supposed to be. I'm going to move him. I'm going to move him over here. So he'll be over here by himself, 13y. Then the negative 7x, negative 17 are still there. After I've done that, oh, okay, now just to get the y by itself, I'd have to divide everything by the 13. And it would be messy. The y is going to be the only one that looks pretty. He's by himself, but now I have negative 7 over 13x and negative 17 over 13. So that would be incredibly ugly to try to graph, because we would have to try to figure out where on the y-axis is negative 17 over 13. So if everything starts out on one side, I would move the y from that side over to the left side. If the y happened to start out positive, then when I moved it over, it would become negative, and then I'd have to divide by a negative. Oh, duh. I put Brandy's answer on my problem, so of course it said it's wrong. Duh. It probably, I'm sure that it would be thinking like, where would she get that answer? So for this problem, 20x plus 4y minus 16. Remember, I'm trying to get it in slope intercept form, get the y by itself. So in this case, I would subtract the 4y to move it over to the left. The 20x minus 16 would still be there. And then everybody would get divided by negative 4. It's okay, it doesn't keep my scores. So 20 divided by negative 4 is negative 5. That's still got the x. Negative 16 divided by negative 4 is plus 4. So this one turned out to look very neat, because the 4 divided evenly into those things. So if we look down here, subtract the y's, divide everything by negative 4. And you'll see they did the same thing that, you could just put it right there. That would just show, that's what we did. All right, so that ends my recording portion of today. So I'm going to stop that. So there'll be one video posted that includes all the lessons from today. It'll be posted after class and after I have a chance to, it has to convert and then upload. So there's a bit of a process that takes approximately an hour between the converting and the uploading, depending on how long the video is. So